want to get right to the latest on Hurricane Florence.
Yeah, the governor is calling it a monster. It is. Look how massive this storm is, bigger than the state of Michigan. The National Weather Service now warning it could be the storm of a lifetime for parts of the Carolina coast.
Mass evacuations are underway at this hour, creating gridlock on highways. Long lines at gas stations and shelters are now starting to be open.
Nearly 3,000 National Guard troops are being activated with orders to preserve life and safety when Florence hits.
This has the potential to be the costliest storm ever to hit the U.S. The worst-case scenario estimated at more than $170 billion of damage. We're going to talk live to North Carolina Governor in just a moment. Craig and Dylan have fanned out across the storm zone. But here's the man of the hour, Al Roker, with where this storm is headed. Morning, Al.
Well, good morning, guys. And we keep getting changes on the track of this thing, and we got to watch it very carefully. This is the latest. Right now, you can see it's a 400-mile diameter on it, 575 miles southeast of Cape Fear, North Carolina, 130-mile-per-hour winds. It's moving west-northwest at 17 miles per hour. That's been a consistent movement since yesterday at 5 o'clock. We've got hurricane warnings now stretching from Cape Hatteras all the way down into central North Carolina. That will probably be extended later on today. We have storm surge watches for much of the southeastern Atlantic coast. So here's the latest on the track of this system. And the track is going to be everything. By Friday morning, 2 a.m., it's a Category 3 storm just off the coast of North Carolina. The northeast quadrant takes the strongest brunt, and you'd say, okay, that's great, but look what happens. It starts to parallel the coast and then comes inland around Myrtle Beach sometime early Saturday morning. But here's the big question mark. Will it be the American model or the European model? Today and tomorrow, it continues to track to the coast, and then it puts on the brakes, sits there, and parallels the coast, which if it just sits there and meanders, it becomes a storm surge machine, and that is the worst-case scenario for the coast. Better for inland, at least for now. We look at the impacts for the winds, the power outage potential. Total power outages possible from the Outer Banks all the way down through Wilmington, widespread as you get a little further, and then scattered as you move inland. The storm surge, this is what we are most frightened about. Seawater could move in miles. Look at this, possibility of a 9 to 13-foot storm surge. High tide on Friday, 11:46 at Wrightsville, Charleston 12:28. If it comes in at high tide, those numbers are on top of the high tide. And then Saturday into Friday night, you're looking at a high tide again. The storm surge is basically a wall of water that pushes in. As the winds push that water, it continues to move in. The water sits, then the next high tide, it pushes in again, and that's the big problem. And then rainfall. Depending on the path, that's where the heaviest rain is going to be. Right now, we're going to stay with this 10-inch or more from Roanoke down to Wilmington, Cape Hatteras, down to Myrtle Beach. 40-inch totals not completely out of the question, guys. Catastrophic flooding. And again, the path is going to be everything. That's going to determine the storm surge. 60% of people who lose their lives lose it in the flooding of the storm surge.
Yeah, a lot of people think it's the wind that gets you in a hurricane, but it is often the water. All along the coasts of the Carolinas and Virginia, this is a day for stocking up and boarding up and getting out. Well, Craig is right in the path of the storm. He's made his way to Wilmington, North Carolina. Craig, what's it like there this morning?
Hoda, good to see you this morning. I want to show you what we've been talking about here this morning. If you take a look at the skies behind this, those beautiful pinks, those clouds, it's postcard pretty. Literally, the calm before the storm here. We are standing along the appropriately named Cape Fear River. You can see the boats behind me in the marina, tethered for now. The hope is they will stay that way, but as Al just mentioned, we are in that area where we are expecting catastrophic storm surge later today. People here, by and large, the residents, the tourists, they are heeding the warnings, they are getting out. First responders bracing for the worst. All right, so both of you have covered hurricanes before, and it's always interesting to me the number of people who decide to heed those warnings and the number of people who stay behind. Last night on that 2-hour drive from the airport in Raleigh, we saw a caravan of cars who appeared to be heeding the warnings getting out. The area where we are here in Wilmington, it's going to be under a mandatory evacuation by 8 o'clock tonight, but so far it looks like a lot of folks have decided not to wait for the mandatory evacuation and have decided to exercise better judgment because, again, at this point tomorrow, 18 hours from now, high winds expected, lots of rain expected as well. Savannah, Hoda, we'll send it back to you.
Yeah, it is important to listen to those warnings and to get out while you can. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you so much. Well, Dylan is in place as well. He's just up the coast from Craig on North Carolina's Outer Banks, and they've got to have real worries there this morning. Dylan, good morning.
Good morning, Savannah. And it seems like here, too, folks are heeding the warning. Several homes are boarded up. Businesses are closed or are closing through the day today. Today is really the last chance to prepare. I want to take you through a timeline of what this area will see as we go forward, starting with Thursday morning. That's when those tropical storm force winds will first make their way on shore. We're looking at gusty winds to start kicking in by Thursday afternoon. The outer bands of the hurricane will get here. That means torrential downpours. And once the rain starts, it's not going to stop, perhaps all through the weekend. Going into Thursday night, the hurricane storm force winds arrive. Those are your winds over 74 miles per hour with even higher gusts. So that 74-mile-per-hour wind is a sustained wind that already starts to cause some damage. Friday morning around 11:30, we're worried about the high tide because that will be the start of the storm surge, that perhaps 9 to 13-foot wall of water that could make its way on shore. Then Friday afternoon, based on the current track, we will see it all: the storm surge, the torrential downpours, the hurricane force winds. And after that point, it's still too early to determine if this area will stay on that northeastern side of the storm, continuing to keep the worst of the winds and the rain and the storm surge around. Those are still the details we need to iron out. But today, it is still beautiful here, but conditions will rapidly deteriorate on Thursday. So today is the last chance for people to keep heeding those warnings. Savannah and Hoda.
Going to be such a different picture behind you in 24, 48 hours. Dylan, thank you.
We're going to bring in North Carolina's Governor Roy Cooper. Governor Cooper, good morning to you.
Good morning.
This is your first major storm as governor. You described it yourself as a monster. You've had several briefings trying to get your head around this. Put it in perspective for us. Describe this storm for us.
This storm is big and it's vicious. People of North Carolina are used to storms, but this one is different. North Carolinians are a hardy bunch, and you have a number of people who may want to stay behind. We're telling people they are putting their lives at risk when they do that. Yesterday on 9/11, we honored our first responders, and you're putting first responders at risk if you stay behind on the coast with this kind of storm coming our way, with the storm surge, the high winds, and the flooding that we expect. So safety's the number one thing on our mind. We have activated 2,600 National Guard troops. We have shelters open. I think we're ready for this, but we want people to be safe.
Governor, as you know, each storm kind of has its own personality. We heard Al talking about it. What's the thing that's really worrying you right now? I mean, aside from people not heeding evacuations, is it the storm surge and flooding? Is it the rain? Is it the winds? Is it all of the above?
Yeah, I think the fact that this storm is so wide and there is such a cone of uncertainty, we know that this storm, as soon as it hits the North and or South Carolina coast, that it's going to hang around. And then that's when you start measuring rain in feet, not inches. And flooding is a significant risk here. And often when there is flooding, the people who can afford it the least get hit the most. And so we're ready to spring into action to make sure we help those people, get them to safety. Our local and federal partners are coordinated. We just want people to be careful. If you have to evacuate, please do obey the orders. But also the inland counties, most every North Carolinian is going to feel this storm in one way or another. So we want them to hunker down, get their emergency kit, their food, their water, their medications, important documents, pet plans, all of that. to make sure their family's safe.
Governor, the president said that we are absolutely and totally prepared to deal with this. Have you had a conversation with President Trump about this?
I have, and he told me the same thing. Our FEMA partners are in North Carolina ready to help. I was at Fort Bragg yesterday. I'll be headed up to Kinston at the Global Trans Park today, two of the FEMA staging areas. We've done something a little unusual with this storm in that usually you wait to distribute supplies and equipment after the storm hits so you'll know where to go. We've done some pre-distribution here because we know that the damage from this storm will be far and wide, and we can pretty much rest assured that the areas that where we have distributed this equipment and supplies are going to need it, because these roads are going to be almost impassable after this storm passes. But I think we're ready. North Carolinians will get through this. It's just going to be a very tough few days and weeks.
You are a very hardy bunch. You're right. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper will be thinking about you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk more about the president's response to this storm, and also some of his comments yesterday raised some eyebrows about the administration's response to Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. NBC's Peter Alexander at the White House with all of that. Peter, the president's up and he's tweeting this morning.
Yeah, Savannah, you're right. This morning, the president is sounding the alarm on Twitter, saying Hurricane Florence is looking even bigger than anticipated. As you noted, he did raise eyebrows, though, on Tuesday, defending his administration's response to last year's storms, including Hurricane Maria, that left Puerto Rico devastated. The death toll there just last week raised to nearly 3,000. The president yesterday describing it as incredibly successful, saying it was an incredible unsung success. This morning on Twitter, doubling down, writing, "We got A+ for our recent hurricane work in Texas and Florida and did an unappreciated great job in Puerto Rico, even though an inaccessible island with very poor electricity and a totally incompetent mayor of San Juan. We are ready for the big one that is coming." The president insisting the safety of the American people is my absolute priority, saying the government is sparing no expense to protect American lives. And in response to President Trump's comments yesterday, we're hearing from a Democratic Senator, Chris Murphy, tweeting, "If you're in Florence's path and considering riding it out, your president just said that a hurricane response where 3,000 die is his measure of success. Get out of there." We'll keep an eye on the president over the course of this day as he gathers with his head of FEMA and with the head of the DHS preparing for the federal response to this storm. Back to you.
All right, Peter, thank you very much.
Another major